The U.S. Department of Justice has reportedly decided not to charge two white officers who shot and killed a black man in Louisiana last summer. Video footage appearing to show the officers holding down Alton Sterling as they fired their weapons sparked days of protests in Baton Rouge. News of the decision leaked to U.S. media on Tuesday before the city mayor or the Sterling family had been told. People soon began gathering outside the shop where the incident happened. A vigil was organized for Tuesday night, with small crowds gathering near the city's police headquarters. The civil rights investigation was opened soon after the 37-year-old was killed outside the grocery shop he was selling CDs. At the time, a series of fatal police shootings involving African Americans had sparked a debate about police use of force. The federal decision not to prosecute the two officers comes with a new U.S. government and a new head of the Justice Department, Attorney General Jeff Sessions. It does not mean the state of Louisiana could not bring its own charges. What happened when Sterling died? Police were called after reports of a man threatening people with a gun outside a shop. Mobile video footage appeared to show two officers wrestling a man in a red shirt to the floor. One of the officers pinned the man's arm to the floor with his knee and then appeared to pull out his gun and point it at the man. A voice is heard shouting, "He's got a gun." Then shots ring out and the camera moves away. Mr. Sterling, a father of 5, died at the scene. Police said he refused to comply with the officers' commands, so they used a stun gun to bring him to the ground. The officers say they saw a gun in one of his pockets and saw his arm move there as if he was reaching for it, just before he was shot. There were nearly 200 arrests in the protests over Mr. Sterling's death, which preceded a turbulent couple of weeks in U.S. race relations. A day after the fatal confrontation, a black driver in Minnesota was shot dead in a traffic stop, and in the same week 5 police officers in Dallas were killed. Less than 2 weeks later, 3 police officers in Baton Rouge were killed in an ambush, further inflaming tensions in that community. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards, who called the video footage disturbing, called for a federal investigation into Sterling's death. 2 other fatal police shootings were in the news on Tuesday. In Texas, police changed their story in what happened when an unarmed black teenager was shot and killed on Saturday night as his car drove away from police. And a former officer in South Carolina pleaded guilty to violating the civil rights of an African American he shot in the back as he ran away. The family of Alton Sterling was angry Tuesday night after media reports surfaced indicating a decision had been made on whether to prosecute 2 Baton Rouge, Louisiana, police officers in his death. The Washington Post and the New York Times first reported Tuesday that multiple sources told them the U.S. Justice Department, which led the investigation into the 2016 shooting, will close its investigation and not seek charges against the officers. Family members said they had been told they would get news of the decision before it was publicized. CNN has not independently confirmed the media reports, which cited unnamed sources. The Justice Department's official statement Tuesday was there was no decision. Sterling family members, their attorneys, Louisiana's governor and Baton Rouge's mayor said they had received no word. Sterling's aunt said she, too, had not heard from federal authorities. But she was upset by the reports that said the officers would not be charged. "It's not right. Lord have mercy. Oh my God," Sandra Sterling told. They have not heard from the Justice Department on a decision in the case, in which 2 white police officers were involved in the shooting while trying to detain Sterling, a black man, outside a Baton Rouge convenience store on July 5. Justice Department spokeswoman Sarah Iska Flores told CNN the department has not communicated to anyone a decision. When there is a decision, the family will be notified first and then the department will hold a news conference, she said. The shootings set off protests across Baton Rouge and beyond and became an important chapter in the national discussion of how police interact with minorities. The officers, Blaine Solomoni and Howie Lake II, were placed on paid administrative leave after the shooting. The mayor was upset by the reports, the first of which appeared in the Post. "I am appalled that this news, whether true or false, has been disseminated without a formal decision being relayed to the Sterling family first. Also, no one in my office or the governor's office has been notified by the U.S. Attorney's Office of a decision or timeline," Sharon Weston Broome said. A spokesman for Governor John Bel Edwards said he was unaware of any decision. The governor's office has not been notified of a timeline or decision regarding the Alton Sterling investigation, Richard Carbo said. It is unclear whether the state will pursue charges. Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry tweeted that he will comment after an official DOJ announcement. People gathered outside the Triple S Food Mart on Tuesday for a planned vigil. Another of Alton Sterling's aunts expressed her disappointment to the crowd. "We need closure. We need a conviction, we need justice," Vera Sterling said. The first bystander video, filmed from inside a car, shows Sterling and Solomoni and Lake, who were answering a 911 report of a man with a gun, standing near a vehicle outside the convenience store. The camera pans downward and a pop is heard. Someone yells, "Get on the ground." Another pop, possibly from a taser, rings out. The convenience store owner said officers twice deployed the devices before the shooting. An officer rushes Sterling and pulls him to the ground. The other officer assists in restraining Sterling. Someone shouts, "He's got a gun." An officer draws something from his waistband and points it at Sterling. More yelling ensues, followed by 2 loud bangs, then 3 more bangs. The second video shows Sterling on the ground as one officer straddles him and another kneels to his left. After the gunshots, the camera captures Sterling with a large blood stain on his chest as an officer lying on the pavement aims his weapon. As Sterling moves his left arm toward his face and then his chest, the other officer appears to remove something from Sterling's right pocket. Police Chief Carl Dabadie Jr. said Sterling was armed at the time, and a witness said the officer removed a gun from Sterling's pocket. A police incident report does not specify who shot Sterling. 2 white police officers will not face federal charges in the fatal shooting of a black man last year in Baton Rouge, La, which caused widespread unrest there. The decision was made with the Trump administration under scrutiny about how it will handle prosecutions in racially charged police shootings, a priority of the Obama administration. The decision, in the death of Alton B. Sterling, was confirmed Tuesday afternoon by 2 people familiar with it. Local officials criticized the Justice Department for not informing them before the news became public. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who inherited the Baton Rouge case, is certain to face further attention over how he proceeds in the fatal shooting Saturday of a 15-year-old black student by an officer near Dallas. The officer was fired Tuesday. The Sterling decision, the Dallas killing and an officer's guilty plea Tuesday in a fatal 2015 shooting in South Carolina reignited a debate over race and criminal justice that has played out in various ways since Michael Brown was killed nearly 3 years ago by a police officer in Ferguson, Mo. Continue reading the main story. Related coverage. Alton Sterling shooting in Baton Rouge prompts Justice Department investigation July 6, 2016. How activist group stumbled on the Baton Rouge police killing July 6, 2016. Mr. Sessions, who, in the first months of his tenure, ordered a broad review of federal agreements with law enforcement agencies, will oversee the outcomes of other cases, including those surrounding the deaths of Eric Garner, who was placed in a chokehold by a New York police officer, and 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland. The bar for charging police officers with federal civil rights violations is extremely high, and prosecutions are rare. Even the Obama administration, which cultivated an aggressive reputation on such cases, declined to prosecute officers in several high-profile killings, most notably the 2014 shooting of Mr. Brown, and it saw challenges in bringing charges in Mr. Sterling's death. On Tuesday evening, around the Triple S Food Mart parking lot where Mr. Sterling was killed, People congregated in the same way they did last summer. Mr. Sterling's face is painted near the entrance, with stuffed animals in front. Signs advertise specials on cigarettes and fried chicken, and another reads, "Stop the killing." "I'm not surprised, because it happens all the time," said Kosha Weber, 21, an African-American resident of Baton Rouge, her voice cracking in anger. "Where do things go from here? There's no justice. There's no nothing." Derek Brody, 45, said, over and over again, "They kill a human being, and they get away with it, just 'cause they got a blue suit." The mayor-president of Baton Rouge, Sharon Weston Broom, expressed outrage that neither she nor Mr. Sterling's family had been told of the decision not to charge the officers before it was reported by the Washington Post. "No one in my office or the governor's office has been notified by the U.S. Attorney's Office of a decision or timeline," she said in a statement. "When I know something, the people of Baton Rouge will know, and we will get through it together." Chris Stewart and Justin Bamberg, lawyers for Mr. Sterling's family, confirmed that they had not been told ahead of time. "We have been promised that we will meet in person with DOJ before any announcement is made," they said in a statement. In a Twitter post on Tuesday night, the Louisiana Attorney General, Jeff Landry, said his office had still not been notified of the Justice Department's decision. "Our office will not comment until that time," Mr. Landry wrote. Representative Barbara Lee, Democrat of California, said Mr. Sterling had been shot in cold blood and wrote on Twitter, "The DOJ's decision not to pursue justice is a travesty." A spokesman for the Justice Department declined to comment. A spokeswoman for the Baton Rouge Police Department also declined to comment and would not confirm the employment status of the two officers who had been under investigation, referring inquiries to the Justice Department. The officers, Blaine Salamone and Howie Lake II, did not respond to phone messages. Both were put on administrative leave last year. Early on July 5, 2016, Officers Salamone and Lake responded to a report that a black man in a red shirt selling CDs outside the Triple S Food Mart had threatened the caller with a gun. In a cell phone video, an officer is seen pushing Mr. Sterling onto the hood of the car and tackling him to the ground. He is held down by the officers as one appears to hold a gun above his chest. Mr. Sterling had a criminal history, including convictions for battery and illegal possession of a gun, although it was not clear whether the officers knew that. The video of Mr. Sterling's death, and one of the fatal shooting of another black man, Philando Castile, by white officers in Minnesota the next day, stoked a debate about race and criminal justice that intensified when a sniper gunned down police officers, killing 5, at a demonstration in Dallas on July 7. That protest was among dozens nationwide in the days after Mr. Sterling's death. In Baton Rouge alone, more than 100 people were arrested, including DeRay McKesson, a prominent activist for the Black Lives Matter movement who spent time in jail there on accusations that he ignored instructions to stay out of the road. About 2 weeks after Mr. Sterling's death, a man attacked police officers in Baton Rouge, killing 3 and wounding 3 others. In directing the Justice Department to review its agreements with law enforcement agencies, Mr. Sessions said the individual misdeeds of bad actors should not impugn entire departments. His predecessor, Loretta E. Lynch, released a report in August that illustrated a systemic pattern of discrimination by Baltimore's police department, which had disproportionately stopped and searched black residents. And last summer, President Barack Obama denounced the racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice system, while emphasizing that his comments were not an attack on law enforcement itself. At a confirmation hearing in January, Mr. Sessions expounded on his opposing views, suggesting that civil rights investigations inhibited the police in their duties. Law enforcement as a whole has been unfairly maligned and blamed for the actions of a few bad actors and for allegations about police that were not true, he told the Senate Judiciary Committee. Morale has suffered, he added, noting that in the face of public criticism, more police officers had died on the job. This is a wake-up call. This must not continue. The Justice Department must still decide whether to bring charges in other cases, including the death of Tamir Rice. Officials say that case poses challenges because the boy had a toy gun. Miss Lynch authorized prosecutors last year to seek charges in the death of Mr. Garner. Civil rights prosecutors have been presenting evidence before a grand jury in that case. The officer has said his use of force was justified. Earlier on Tuesday, Michael T. Slager, an officer in South Carolina who was charged by the Justice Department in the fatal shooting of a black man, Walter L. Scott, pleaded guilty to a single count of using excessive force to deprive Mr. Scott of his civil rights, under a plea deal in which officials will not pursue other charges against him. Mr. Slager, fired from the North Charleston police force after he shot Mr. Scott, who was unarmed and fleeing, in April 2015, could be sentenced to life in prison after acknowledging that he used deadly force even though it was objectively unreasonable under the circumstances. The Justice Department sought an indictment of Mr. Slager well before Mr. Sterling died, and its lawyers were preparing for trial. On Tuesday, Mr. Sessions said in a news release on the plea that his department would hold accountable any law enforcement officer who violates the civil rights of our citizens by using excessive force. The Justice Department has reportedly decided not to bring charges against two white Baton Rouge police officers in the death of a black man whose fatal shooting was captured on mobile phone video, fueling protests in Louisiana's capital and beyond. The decision, reported by the Washington Post and Associated Press but not yet publicly announced, doesn't prevent state authorities from investigating Alton Sterling's death themselves and pursuing their own criminal charges. Two cell phone videos of Sterling's deadly struggle with two white officers, Blaine Solomoni and Howie Lake II, quickly spread on social media after the July 5 shooting. A police report says Sterling was initially jolted with a stun gun after he didn't comply with the officer's commands to put his hands on the hood of a car. The report also says the officers saw the butt of a gun in one of Sterling's pants pockets and saw him try to reach for it before he was shot. Justin Bamberg, an attorney for some of Sterling's relatives, has said the family wanted an indictment. Dozens of people gathered on Tuesday at the scene of the shooting upon hearing the news and held a vigil. One of Alton's aunts spoke at the vigil and led the crowd in chants of "No justice, no peace." "It's been almost a year and we're still suffering like it happened yesterday," said one of Sterling's aunts, Veda Sterling. "We need closure. We need a conviction. We need justice." Arthur Reed, a local activist, said he broke the news to another of Sterling's aunts, Sandra, in a phone call after seeing the news reports. Reed says she broke down crying and is heartbroken, not only because of the decision but because the Justice Department didn't notify the family first. "We just think it wasn't done properly," he said. Bamberg also represents relatives of Walter Scott, an unarmed black man who was running from a traffic stop in Charleston, South Carolina, when a white police officer shot and killed him in 2015. The former officer, 35-year-old Michael Slager, pleaded guilty to federal civil rights charges on Tuesday, 5 months after a jury deadlocked on state murder charges against him. In Baton Rouge last summer, police arrested nearly 200 protesters following Sterling's death, which occurred a day before another black man was killed by police in Minnesota. Racial tensions in Baton Rouge were simmering when a black military veteran from Missouri ambushed and killed 3 Baton Rouge law enforcement officers and wounded 3 others before being shot dead on July 17. The city was still reeling from the shootings when August floodwaters damaged or destroyed tens of thousands of homes in the area. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards immediately asked for a federal investigation of Sterling's death. He called cell phone video of the incident disturbing, to say the least. The videos show Sterling scuffling with Solomoni and Lake after they responded to a caller's complaint that Sterling had threatened the caller with a gun outside the Triple S Food Mart. The two officers had Sterling pinned on his back when gunfire erupted, moments after someone yelled, "He's got a gun." Baton Rouge Police Chief Carl Dabadie Jr. has said Sterling was armed but didn't specify the type of weapon. The store's owner, Abdullah Muflai, has said Sterling wasn't holding a gun during the shooting, but he saw officers remove one from his pocket afterward. As a convicted felon, Sterling couldn't legally carry a gun. Court records show Sterling had pleaded guilty in 2011 to being a felon in possession of a firearm and illegally carrying a weapon, and was arrested in May 2009 after an officer confronted him outside another store where he was selling CDs. In the shooting's aftermath, Dabadie called the encounter a horrible tragedy. Police have said they have dashcam and bodycam video and store surveillance footage of the shooting, though none of it has been released. A federal judge sealed a coroner's report on Sterling's autopsy. Both officers were placed on administrative leave, a standard procedure. Soleimani has been a Baton Rouge police officer for 4 years, Lake had been on the force for 3 years. Each had 2 prior use of force complaints against them, and they were cleared in all 4 of those cases, internal affairs records indicate. East Baton Rouge District Attorney Hillamore recused himself from any state criminal investigation into Sterling's death, citing his professional relationship with Soleimani's parents. Soleimani's father, Noel Soleimani, is a Baton Rouge police captain. His mother, Melissa Soleimani, retired as a Baton Rouge police captain last June after 32 years on the force. Moore's recusal left Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry to decide whether to have his own office review evidence for possible state charges or to appoint another district attorney to take over the case. Landry has said he wouldn't have access to the federal investigation on Sterling's shooting until it was completed. Landry said in a July 11 statement that his office trusts the federal government to investigate the case and looks forward to fulfilling our responsibilities after getting the results of the federal investigation. Bamberg, the attorney for some of Sterling's relatives, urged Landry in July to fight for justice in the case and expressed hope that the Attorney General's office one day will get involved. The mass arrests of people protesting Sterling's death led to federal lawsuits accusing police of using excessive force and violating protesters' civil rights. Governor Edwards, who comes from a family of sheriffs, has said he was pleased with the police response to the protests and defended their deployment of riot gear and weaponry.